She kept his number saved under a name that wasn't his. Not because she was hiding something, because she was protecting something. There's a difference, and this story is about that difference and how long it takes a person to understand which one they're doing. Rosalind Hart was 53 years old when the thing people would later call a mistake walked 3 houses down and moved into the lower unit of a duplex on her street. She did not know that yet. She was on her porch the morning he arrived, grading nothing. She had retired 4 months earlier from 26 years as a high school English department head, and she still carried a red pen in her cardigan pocket out of muscle memory, watching a moving truck do the slow, painful work of reversing into a narrow driveway. She watched for a few minutes. Then she went inside. She did not think about it again. That is the first thing about Rosalind that matters. She was not looking. She had spent years not looking, and she had gotten very good at it. And she had told herself that was the same as being at peace. It wasn't. But she didn't know that yet either. His name was Darnell Whitmore, 31 years old, UX designer, remote work, which meant he was home most of the time, which meant he was visible in the way people who work from home are visible to their neighbors. On the porch with a laptop, walking the dog at irregular hours, existing in the neighborhood in a way that people with office jobs don't. The dog was named Biscuit, elderly beagle, the kind of dog that moved like it had somewhere important to be, but had long since forgotten where. The first time Rosalind spoke to Darnell was because of Biscuit. She was walking past his duplex on a Tuesday morning. She walked every morning now, because retirement had given her the strange gift of unstructured time, and she was still learning what to do with it. And Biscuit came to the low fence at the edge of the yard and looked at her with the specific expression that old dogs have, which is an expression that says, "I have seen things. I require acknowledgement." Rosalind crouched down. She scratched behind his ears. Biscuit accepted this as his due. "He likes you." She looked up. Darnell was standing on the porch steps, coffee in hand, looking down at them with something that wasn't quite a smile, but was close. "He likes everyone," she said. "He really doesn't," Darnell said. "He bit my landlord last March." She laughed. It surprised her, the laugh. It came out before she decided to allow it. They talked for 4 minutes. She learned his name, his dog's name, that he had moved from Columbus, that he worked in tech. He learned her name, that she had just retired, that she had lived on the street for 19 years. It was the conversation of strangers who share a street and nothing else. She walked home. She thought, "He has kind eyes." Then she told herself that was a meaningless observation and put the red pin back in her cardigan pocket and made coffee and did not think about it again. That is also not quite true. If you are watching this and you already know where this is going, I want you to wait. Because the place you think this is going is not where it goes. The friendship built the way neighborhood friendships build. Not quickly, not with intention, through accumulation. The way sediment becomes ground, slowly and without announcement. It started with tomatoes. He had a container garden on his back patio, 6 large pots, heirloom varieties, the kind of project a person takes on when they live alone and need something to tend. He grew more than he could eat. The second week of August, he left a paper bag on her porch with 4 tomatoes and a post-it that said "From the gardenee." She stood on her porch holding the bag for a moment. Then she went inside and made a tomato tart and left half of it on his porch the next morning with a note that said "Thank you, R." He left a note on her door 2 days later. "This was the best thing I've eaten in 6 months. Do you teach cooking too?" She had not told him she was a teacher. He must have asked a neighbor. She wrote back, "I taught English, but I'll accept the compliment." This exchange, paper notes, not texts, because that is how it started and neither of them changed the medium, continued across 4 weeks. They were not long notes. They were the notes of 2 people who had decided, without discussing it, that they were paying attention to each other. She noticed the decision. She didn't examine it. The first real conversation happened in late September. His internet went down on a Wednesday evening when he had a client presentation due at 9 the next morning. He knocked on her door at 7:15 looking like a man who had already cycled through 3 other options and was down to his last one. "I'm so sorry to ask this," he said. "My internet is down. I have a deadline. Is there any chance?" "Come in," she said. She set him up at the kitchen table, made tea, went to the living room with a book, intending to give him space. 40 minutes later, he appeared in the doorway. "Presentation submitted." "Thank you." He paused. "What are you reading?" She showed him the cover. "Middlemarch. George Eliot." The worn paperback she had taught from for 15 years. I read that in college, he said. I remember not understanding Kasaban at all. Most 20-year-olds don't. Do you? Now I do, she said. That's the thing about books. They grow with you. Or you grow into them. He sat down in the armchair across from her. Not as a guest overstaying his welcome. As a person who had been handed a conversation he didn't want to end. They talked for 2 hours. She remembered, afterward, being surprised at how she talked. Not the careful, measured way she talked to colleagues or Cecily or the friends who worried about her. The way she used to talk in her 20s, before she got careful, running a little ahead of herself, interrupting her own thoughts to follow a better one, laughing at the midpoint of a sentence. She remembered thinking, when did I stop talking like this? She didn't follow the thought further than that. When he left, he stood at the door for a moment and said, I'd like to do this again sometime. Just the conversation part, not the internet crisis part. She said, I know a good bakery. She didn't know why she said that. It wasn't an answer to what he'd said. It was something else, an opening offered before she had time to close it. He smiled. Saturday? She said yes. She closed the door. She stood in the hallway for a moment. Then she went to the kitchen and made herself a cup of chamomile and told herself it was just coffee, just a bakery, just a neighbor. She was a woman who had taught literature for 26 years. She knew exactly what it meant when a person said, I know a good bakery, when someone said they wanted to see her again. She just wasn't ready to know it yet. Actually, stop what you're doing for a second. I need you to pay attention to this next part. Because this is where the story stops being about them and starts being about something you have probably lived through yourself. There is a pattern that happens to people who have been careful for a long time. They mistake their caution for wisdom. And caution can be wisdom. It can be the thing that keeps you from making the same mistake twice. But there is a version of caution that is not wisdom. It is something older and more frightened than wisdom. It is the decision, made so long ago you have forgotten making it, that the safest way to move through the world is to want less than you actually want. Rosalind had been making that decision for 8 years. Since Gerald left. Since the morning she found the email she wasn't meant to find. Her husband of 18 years, in love, genuinely in love, with a woman named Patricia who was 42 and beautiful and unaware of Rosalind's existence. Since the divorce that followed, which was civil and awful in the specific way civil divorces are awful, everyone behaving well and feeling terrible, saying the right things and meaning other things entirely. She had not been with anyone since Gerald. Not because she couldn't have been. She was not a woman who went unnoticed. She was warm and intelligent and had the kind of face that improved with age, the kind that meant something, that had lived in it. There had been opportunities. A colleague at a professional conference who had made his interest clear. A man she'd met through Cecily's suggestion, a mild-mannered architect, who had taken her to dinner twice before she stopped returning his calls. She told herself she wasn't ready. And then she told herself she preferred her life the way it was. And then she stopped telling herself anything at all, because there is a point at which the story you tell yourself becomes the ground you walk on, and you stop noticing it's a story. That is the pattern. The person who arrives to interrupt, it almost never looks the way you expect them to look. Saturday at the bakery was easy in a way she didn't trust. They talked about Middlemarch for 20 minutes. Then about the neighborhood. The new coffee shop on the corner that had been a hardware store for 40 years before it closed. Then about Columbus, where he'd grown up, the specific texture of a Midwestern childhood. Then about her teaching. And this is where it shifted, quietly, the way light shifts when a cloud moves. He asked questions the way people ask questions when they are genuinely interested rather than performing interest. There is a difference, and you can always feel it. He asked about specific students. Had she ever had one who completely changed how she saw a book? He asked about the moment she knew she wanted to teach. He asked what she missed most about it. Nobody had asked her what she missed about it. She had been asked, many times, how she was enjoying retirement. She had answered, well, fine, getting used to it, lovely to have the time. That was the answer she had practiced. It was not entirely false, and it was not entirely true, and she had stopped expecting anyone to push past it. He pushed past it. You don't look like someone who's enjoying it, he said. Not unkindly. Observationally. I'm adjusting, she said, to not being someone who shapes people's relationship with language for a living. She looked at him. That's a very specific way to put it. Isn't that what you did? It was exactly what she had done, and no one, not Cecily, Not her closest friend Margaret, not her own internal monologue in the months since retirement, had put it that precisely. Yes, she said. That's what I did. Then I'd find the adjustment hard too, he said. That's not a small thing to set down. She looked at her coffee cup for a moment. When she looked up, she said, Nobody's said it like that before. How have they said it? Enjoy the rest. You've earned it. He was quiet for a beat. That's what people say when they don't know what to do with someone else's grief. She didn't answer immediately. Then she said, It is a little like grief, actually. I've been trying to find a different word for it. That one fits. You're allowed to grieve it. I know, she said, though she hadn't known. Not until that sentence. The months that followed were not dramatic. That is the first thing to understand. People hear the beginning of a story like this, and they expect drama, scenes with consequence, declarations that echo the architecture of a film. What happened between Rosalind and Darnell across October and November was quieter than that and more complicated. He continued to leave tomatoes until the season ended. She continued to bake. They walked on Sunday mornings, his idea, her route, biscuit between them moving at his careful elderly pace. They had dinner twice at her kitchen table, once his, once hers, simple meals made without effort in the way meals between comfortable people are made. She was aware of what was building. She would have been aware even if she had tried not to be, and she did try, occasionally. She is an English teacher. She knows how stories are structured. She knew what kind of story this was, and she knew what it meant that she hadn't left it. He was careful with her in a way she recognized as deliberate. He did not rush. He did not perform feelings. He showed up and was present and asked questions and listened to the answers and did not make her feel, at any point, like she was a project or a curiosity or a novelty. She was aware that this carefulness might itself be a strategy. She examined that possibility honestly and could not find the evidence for it. What she found instead was a person who was genuinely there. That was the most disorienting thing. She had been prepared, she realized, for something she could dismiss. She had not been prepared for something she couldn't. I know you might be doing something else right now. Stop for 30 seconds. What I am about to say is the reason this story is worth telling. He told her on a Tuesday evening in early December. She had not planned to be home. She had been about to leave for Margaret's, a standing Thursday dinner that had migrated to Tuesday because of Margaret's schedule. She was in the hallway with her coat half on when she heard the knock. She opened the door. He was standing there without an excuse, no deadline, no borrowed cup of something, no reason except the one reason, which he had apparently decided to stop dressing as something else. Can I come in? He said. She stepped back. He came in, stood in her hallway, and then, without a long preamble, in the quiet way of someone who has rehearsed this and decided that the rehearsal was making it worse, he said what he had apparently come to say, that he was aware she would have reasons, that he was not asking her to dismiss them, that he understood the specific complications of what he was describing, that none of that changed what he wanted to say, which was that he had spent 4 months in her company, and he was not interested in pretending that it was simply a neighborly friendship, and he thought she probably knew that, and he thought she deserved to hear it said plainly. She stood in her hallway with her coat half on, and then she said, You don't know what you're asking. He held her gaze. I know exactly what I'm asking. She believed him. That was the problem. It was not a small problem. It was, in fact, the entire problem, because she had expected, somewhere underneath all of it, to find a reason not to believe him, and she couldn't. She took her coat off. She hung it on the hook by the door. She said, Come sit down. What happened in the weeks that followed is not what the people who eventually learned about it assumed happened. It was not impulsive. It was not reckless in the way people mean when they say reckless, the word they use when they want to say stupid without being accountable for the judgment. It was two people who had been honest with each other for 4 months, deciding to continue being honest with each other in a different configuration. It was also genuinely complicated. She knew that. She never pretended otherwise. She was 22 years older than him, and she understood what that meant, not in the abstract, but specifically. She understood what his life would look like in 10 years, and she understood that her life would look different, and she had said that to him, and he had said, I know. I've thought about it more than you might expect. Have you? She said. I'm 31, he said. Not 21. I know the difference between something I want for a season and something I want to build toward. She was quiet for a moment. What do you want to build toward? I don't know exactly, he said. I know I want to find out. That was the most honest answer he could have given. It was more honest than certainty would have been. Certainty, at this stage, would have been a performance. I don't know exactly, that was real. And she trusted real things more than certain ones. She had been in a marriage with a man who was certain, and certain had meant, in the end, that he was certain about Patricia and not about her. She told him that. He listened to all of it. Her daughter found out in February. A photograph, someone from the neighborhood, one of the Talbot family from 4 houses down, who had seen them at a restaurant downtown and taken a picture in the way people take pictures now, casually and without thinking, and posted it with a caption that was not malicious and was not careful and was seen by Cecily, because Cecily and Wendy Talbot had gone to high school together before Cecily moved to Portland. The call came at 9 on a Sunday morning. Rosalind answered knowing what it was going to be. She had known, in the quiet underneath everything, that this moment was coming. She had not prepared for it in any useful way. Mom. Cecily. A pause. The kind of pause that is not nothing. Is it true? There was no useful way to approach the next few minutes except directly, and so Rosalind went directly. Yes. His name was Darnell. He was 31. He was her neighbor. She had known him for 6 months. She was not going to ask Cecily's permission, but she wanted her to hear it from her, and she was going to listen to whatever Cecily needed to say. What Cecily needed to say was a lot of things. Some of them were fair. Some of them were fear wearing the costume of logic. Some of them were the things children say when they are trying to protect a parent from something and cannot quite separate the protection from the control. She said, "He's younger than me, Mom." She said, "What do you actually know about him?" She said, "I'm worried this isn't. I'm worried you're." She couldn't finish that sentence. Rosalind waited. "You're worried I'm what?" "Vulnerable," Cecily said. "I'm worried you're vulnerable, and someone saw that and took advantage of it." Silence. "Say the thing you're thinking," Rosalind said quietly. I don't understand why a 31-year-old man would want me." Another silence. Smaller. More ashamed. "Cecily," Rosalind said, "I need you to understand something. I am not a woman who was tricked. I am a woman who made a choice. Those are different things. You are allowed to be scared for me. You are not allowed to take the choice away from me by calling it something it isn't." The call ended without resolution. That is the honest account of it. There was not a moment of understanding before they hung up. Cecily said she needed time. Rosalind said she understood. And that was the truth, and it was also insufficient. And the line went quiet, and Rosalind sat with the phone in her hand for a long time in her kitchen. Here is what I keep coming back to. The word everyone reached for, when they found out, was the same word. Advantage. He took advantage. And I want to sit with that word for a moment. Because words matter. An English teacher taught me that. Advantage implies a weakness. It implies that one person saw something in another person that could be used. It implies a calculation. But here is the thing about Rosalind that nobody who used that word seemed to account for. She was not weak. She was careful. And the thing that happened when Darnell came along is not that her weakness was exploited. It's that her carefulness was interrupted. Those are not the same thing. And the story of what happens next turns entirely on which one you believe. Her friends divided, as friends will. Margaret, her oldest friend, 20 years of Thursday dinners, and every book she had ever loved. Margaret went quiet in the way thoughtful people go quiet when they are working out what they actually believe rather than what they are supposed to say. She asked questions. Not the frightened questions Cecily had asked. Careful questions, the questions of someone who wanted to understand rather than to redirect. She asked what it was like. She asked what Rosalind had been afraid of and what she wasn't afraid of anymore. She asked, at the end of a long dinner, whether Rosalind was happy. Rosalind thought about it for a real moment. "I'm not sure happy is the right word," she said. "I'm present. I haven't been present in a long time." Margaret was quiet. "Is that enough?" she asked. "For now," Rosalind said. "It's more than I had." Another friend, a woman named Phyllis from the school, a colleague for 16 years, was less careful. Phyllis arrived with concern that was dressed as concern but was built out of something else, something older, something that had more to do with Phyllis's accounting of her own choices than with Rosalind's situation. She said things like, "You know how this ends, don't you? And I just don't want to see you hurt again, and what happens in 5 years when he wants children." Rosalind listened to all of it. Then she said, "Phyllis, I know you love me. I know that's where this is coming from. But I need to ask you something, and I need you to answer it honestly." She paused. "If the situation were reversed, If I were the 31-year-old and he were the 53-year-old, would you be sitting in my kitchen right now? Phyllis opened her mouth, closed it. I'm not asking to make a point, Rosalind said. I'm asking because the answer matters to me. Phyllis left shortly after. They did not have a falling out. Something quieter than a falling out happened. A shift in the architecture of the friendship, a reconfiguration of how much of herself Rosalind was willing to make available. She did not stop liking Phyllis. She stopped telling Phyllis things. And Darnell. Here is what people wanted Darnell to be, a type. The category of young man who pursues older women out of something traceable and suspect. A mother wound. A power dynamic he could control. An attraction to stability that masqueraded as attraction to her specifically. People wanted there to be a mechanism that explained him, because a mechanism would mean that what he felt was not what he said it was. He was aware of this. He had been aware of it from the beginning. People are going to think they know why, he said to her, one evening in March, sitting at her kitchen table in the particular comfort of a Tuesday night that had stopped needing a reason. What do you want to say to that? He thought about it. Nothing, mostly. I can't explain myself to people who've already decided. That's a game with one outcome. Are you angry about it? Not angry, he said. A little tired. He was quiet for a moment. My mother asked me if I was happy. She didn't ask me to explain it. She just asked if I was happy. What did you tell her? That I was, he said. And that I knew it was complicated. And that she taught me the difference between complicated and wrong. So I hoped she'd remember that. Rosalind looked at him across the kitchen table. What did she say? She said she remembered, he said. And then she asked when she was going to meet you. Rosalind was quiet for a moment. She had not expected that. She had been so prepared for the version of this story where the world pressed in from all sides that she had not quite left room for the version where someone, somewhere, simply asked the next question. What did you tell her? Rosalind asked. I told her I'd ask you, he said. So I'm asking. This is the part one want you to sit with. Because this is not the part of the story anyone tells. The part everyone tells is the beginning. The raised eyebrows, the whispered concern, the word advantage dropping into conversations like a verdict. Nobody tells the part where his mother asks when she gets to meet her. Nobody tells the part where the person everyone is worried about is, for the first time in 8 years, sleeping through the night. Nobody tells the small version, the true version. And I think that's because the small version is harder to have an opinion about. The dramatic version, the one where someone gets hurt, where the thing everyone feared comes to pass, where Rosalind ends up alone again and sadder. That version is easy to have an opinion about. This version is not. It is now 14 months since Darnell knocked on Rosalind's door with no excuse. Biscuit has developed a preference for sleeping on her sofa, which she pretends to object to and does not. Cecily came to visit in June. She had warned Rosalind she was coming. She had not warned Rosalind what she intended to do when she got there. What she did, when she got there, was shake Darnell's hand and look at him for a long moment, and then say, My mother is not an easy person to be around all the time. She has opinions about literature that she will not compromise on. She starts crosswords and doesn't finish them, and she will absolutely not tell you when something is bothering her. You'll have to figure it out. She paused. Can you do that? He said, I'm learning. Cecily looked at her mother. Something passed between them that had no words and did not need any. She stayed for 4 days. On the last morning she sat in the kitchen while Rosalind made coffee and said, I don't completely understand it. I know, Rosalind said. I'm not sure I need to, Cecily said. It was not forgiveness. It was not full acceptance. It was a woman in her late 20s who loved her mother sitting with a thing she didn't understand and deciding that her love was larger than her understanding. Rosalind put 2 cups of coffee on the table and sat down. Thank you, she said. Don't thank me yet, Cecily said. I reserve the right to be worried. That's fair, Rosalind said. I'd be suspicious of you if you weren't. Here's what I haven't said yet. The thing I kept circling around and kept not quite landing on. The reason this story is not, in the end, a story about a young man and an older woman. It's a story about what happens when a person has been careful for so long that they've forgotten what it feels like to be chosen. Not settled for. Not compromised toward. Chosen. Rosalind had not felt chosen in a long time. Not by Gerald, who had chosen her and then, 8 years later, had chosen otherwise. Not by the job, which she had been excellent at, but which had not chosen her so much as she had poured herself into it, until there was no daylight between her and it. not by her life, which had continued, as lives do, without consulting her about the shape it was taking. Darnell chose her, specifically, deliberately, with full knowledge of the complications. In the absence of any guarantee about the future, he chose her, and he kept choosing her, and he did not perform the choice. He just made it, Tuesday after Tuesday, tomato after tomato, conversation after conversation. And the question the story leaves open, the question I cannot answer for you, is whether that is enough. Not whether it is romantic, not whether it is advisable, whether it is enough. Because I think that is actually the question most of us are asking when we hear a story like this. Not, is this appropriate? But is this enough? Is being chosen enough? Is presence enough? Is a Tuesday night at a kitchen table with someone who actually sees you enough? And I think the answer is different for everyone. And I think Rosalind's answer is yes. But I also think she knows that yes is not a permanent condition, that it is a practice, that she will have to keep arriving at yes, and so will he, and that there is no version of any relationship, regardless of age, regardless of expectation, regardless of what anyone in the neighborhood thinks, where that is not the truth. There is one thing left to tell. It is the thing that happened in the fall of the second year. The thing that, if this story has an ending, is the closest thing to one. Rosalind went back. Not to Gerald. Not to anything she had left. She went back to teaching. Not full-time. She is too retired and too honest with herself to pretend she wants that back. But a local community college asked, through a mutual connection, whether she might consider a single seminar course in the spring semester. Contemporary literature. 8 weeks. 12 students. She said yes before she had finished reading the email. She told Darnell over dinner that night. He looked at her across the table, and he was smiling before she had finished the sentence. The way people smile when they have been waiting for something, and it has finally arrived. What? She said. Nothing, he said. You look different. Different how? Like yourself, he said. More than usual. She thought about that for a moment. She thought about the version of herself that had walked past his fence on a Tuesday morning with a red pen in her pocket and a careful, settled life, and nothing much to look forward to. She thought about how easy it would have been to keep walking. I have a question, she said. Okay. If I hadn't stopped for biscuit that morning, she said. Do you think any of this happens? He thought about it seriously. She appreciated that he thought about it seriously. I think something happens, he said finally. I think we would have found a way to the same conversation. Maybe later. Maybe differently. He paused. But I think biscuit definitely sped things up. She laughed. And that was it. That was the ending, such as it was. Not a grand declaration. Not a resolution that answered all of the questions the story had opened. Just a woman laughing in her kitchen, at her table, in a life that felt, for the first time in a long time, like it had been chosen rather than defaulted into. So, here's the thing nobody who heard the beginning of this story saw coming. He didn't take advantage of her. She took advantage of him. She took advantage of someone who showed up without a strategy and stayed without a guarantee, and chose her without requiring her to be anything other than what she already was. She took that and she held it, and she decided, after 8 years of careful, that it was worth the risk of being wrong. She wasn't wrong. At least not yet. But here's what I need you to understand. Not yet is the most honest thing I can tell you about any love story. Because the alternative is a lie. A beautiful lie, but a lie. Every love that is worth anything is not yet. It is ongoing. It is the practice of choosing again, next Tuesday, and the Tuesday after. Rosalind knows this. I think that's why she said yes. Not because she was certain. Because she finally understood that certainty was never the point. If you've been in a relationship where you were the one who was seen, really seen, before you were ready to be looked at, you already know what this story is about. Drop it in the comments. I read every one. Subscribe if you're someone whose emotional intelligence is high enough to sit with a story that doesn't end clean. That's what this channel is. Stories that are actually true. And if you stayed until here, there's one more thing. One thing this story opened that I couldn't fully get to. Because Rosalind's story is one version. But there's another person in every story like this one who nobody asks about. The one who does the choosing. What it costs. What it takes. What he knew and when he knew it. That story is the next one. It's already waiting.